This is Tales of Arise. Yes, finally a new Tales game has been released, and it's actually on PC right from the start this time, which is always nice. A trend that they've started with some of their previous games like Tales of Berseria that I hope they continue to follow. But yes, I am a very long-term JRPG fan. I am not ashamed to admit, even though I probably should be. I've loved JRPG since I was a little kid. They were some of the first games I ever played, and I have played many of them since. Which means, yes, I am of course a fan of the Tales games. Tales of the Abyss and Tales of Vesperia are actually my previous favorites, but we finally have a new one to take a look at, so here we go. First off, the art style, since that's a bit of a point of contention for some people. Tales games have always had this very stylized look to them, often looking almost sort of cel-shaded depending on the entry you're talking about. And in this case, they're using something that they're calling an atmospheric shader, and basically what it is like a pseudo-realistic art style underneath a very heavily stylized set of shaders that still makes it look sort of drawn. I know that some purists of the series are not a huge fan of this change, but personally I think it looks really beautiful. I think a lot of the characters look really nice this way, and I think especially the environments look really great. The environment art of this game is super cool. The game has a very striking use of color, both in and out of combat, obviously, with each realm that you go to having very different geography and weather and day and night cycles and everything like that makes it all look different, and each having their own sort of different color palette. It means that a lot of the vistas that you see as you're exploring through the world are genuinely very pretty, so this is a change that I actually quite like. I think it looks really nice. But, of course, the Tales games have always done things a little bit differently in JRPGs, namely by having a real-time combat system, which is usually quite different. And in this case, they are taking the Tales of Berseria combat system and refining it even further to create what I personally think is actually the best combat that this series has ever seen. The attack feedback on your basic attacks has actually been improved a little bit, so they feel a little bit more impactful and satisfying to use, and there are lots and lots of arts, of course, for you to use as well. The arts have been changed up a little bit, with there being 6 arts that you can actually equip at any given time for each character, 3 on the ground and 3 in the air. The arts are fast and flashy and fun to use, and of course there are also lots of spells and spellcasting characters for you to play as well. Of course you can play as any of the individual characters that you want in combat, which is always nice. And the main fun thing for me in Tales game combat has always been making up your own combos by stringing together different varieties of basic attacks and arts to sort of, just like I said, just make your own combos. And that is very much possible here with the very high-flying combat. There's a lot of aerial combat in this game. It's honestly almost approaching like Spectacle Fighter territory in terms of the combat controls and how it actually feels to play. So the process that I've always enjoyed of stringing together your own combos with different combinations of arts and attacks is not only very possible in this game, but really satisfying. In most previous Tales games, the way that the arts work is by using an AP system that works very much like MP. It's just a secondary gauge that you use to cast these attacks, and that eventually will empty and you'll need to use consumables to refill. But they've changed that for this game, and instead you have AG, which are those little blue diamonds above your health gauge, below your character's feet there, and they are what you actually use to cast arts now, and they refill extremely quickly, especially when you're not attacking. This means that you can use like an infinite number of arts basically in each battle. You're not limited by an MP-like system, and instead it uses this more almost sort of combo-based system that allows you to cast multiple arts very quickly and string them all together. You also have boost attacks, which are a new feature to the series. They are those diamonds on the left side of the screen there by the D-pad. Each character has their own boost attack that they can build up by building up their combo and doing damage and defeating enemies and things, and once that gauge is full, they can use their boost attack, and each one is specialized for a different thing. They're usually like high damage attacks that are meant to combat a specific type of enemy, so, aerial enemies versus breaking shields versus sucking up spells that characters are casting and casting them back at them. Each boost attack works a little bit differently, but they're all very powerful and fun to use, and also they refill your AG immediately when you cast them, which means they're not just useful for the damage they do and the utility they provide, but they also allow you to basically string together twice as long of a combo by refilling your art usage in the middle of a combo so you can continue it. There are also boost arts, which are basically combination attacks between 2 characters. They act sort of like culling strikes, as in, once an enemy gets below a certain health threshold, it'll kill them instantly. That's basically what they're for. Once an enemy's health gets low enough, this blue diamond will start to build up on the lock-on symbol on their model, and you build it up just by doing uninterrupted attacks. If you wait too long, it'll empty out again, so you have to keep the pressure on them and keep building this as fast as you can. Once it fills up, you can use one of these boost arts, and it will just combine the character that you're playing at the time with one of the other characters that you have active in the party, and they will use a quick combination attack together that will kill that enemy, but it will also deal a lot of damage to other enemies that are currently on the field. So it's not just useful as like a culling strike, it's also useful for doing damage to everything that's left over, and can even, in fact, sometimes just end combats right away, even if there were several enemies left, because they're so powerful. Overlimit has returned, although it works a little bit differently in this game than it does in a lot of previous entries. Before, it's usually a gauge that you build up by fighting that you can then choose to expend whenever you want to go into Overlimit to empower your characters. In this case, it's not something that you actually choose, it just happens. When you take damage, there's a chance that you will build up Overlimit and eventually go into it by taking enough damage. You can also build it up faster by doing perfect dodges and counterattacks. 2 perfect dodges, that builds up more of it. But once it's sort of built up this invisible gauge, you'll enter into Overlimit. You can have an infinite arts usage and just string them together as much as you want because they won't cost anything while you're in Overlimit. And of course, you'll just be a lot more powerful in general, and you can also hold multiple buttons together while you're connecting with another art to use that character's mystic art, as usual, as a big, huge finisher attack that will consume the rest of your Overlimit to do huge damage to whatever you're hitting at the time. All of this comes together to make a really, really fun, fast-paced, frantic combat system that's super enjoyable, and it makes the boss fights really fun, and it overall is very heavily based on aggression. This is a combat system that you need to constantly be moving and attacking at all times. It heavily rewards chaining together as much of a combo as possible and using your arts very often. You're not very passive, you don't have a guard or anything like that, and you can dodge, but dodging is very fast. It can give you a perfect dodge, of course, if you dodge just at the right time, and getting that perfect dodge allows you to counterattack immediately. So again, it's all about just pressing the offense as much as possible and getting huge combos. So the combat system is very aggressive, but very enjoyable, and like I said, it's also very fast-paced. Something I've noticed, by the way, by its absence is the downtime that battles often represent in JRPGs. This is something I know a lot of people have a problem with this genre, is you have the big whoosh that then goes into the battle, and then you have the enemy intro, and then you have the turn-based fighting, and then you have the victory screen, and then you're back on the field. And some people feel that all of that takes a lot of time and slows the pace of the game down a lot to go through it every time, and it can be kind of obnoxious. And this game has pretty much done away with all of that. As soon as you contact an enemy, you're pretty much in battle right away. There is no fancy whoosh or enemy intro cinematic or whatever. It's just you touch them and you're in battle instantly. And when you actually finish a battle, there is no victory results screen. You know, no, none of that. You just immediately go straight back to the field, and the victory results, like the stuff that you got as drops and the XP and all that, just shows up on the left side of the screen passively while you're exploring, and instead of having its own dedicated time slot after battle, basically, which means that you can be in and out of battle in like 20 seconds and have had a pretty fun experience already, and just be right back exploring as soon as it's done. So that makes the overall sort of battle to exploration gameplay loop really fast-paced. There are some other new mechanics as well. For instance, if you think about it, the fact that you no longer have to use this MP-like resource to cast arts, and instead have these quickly refilling AG points, that means you could technically have infinite healing whenever you wanted to, which would obviously totally break the game. So they have changed the healing system to include a new mechanic called Cure Points. All healing spells, restorative spells, resurrections, all that stuff, they cost those AG points in battle as well as Cure Points. And the only way to refill the Cure Point gauge is to either use a relatively rare set of consumables that can refill it, or to rest at an inn or at a campfire, which means it basically makes healing more of a resource in this game, which I personally think is actually a pretty cool idea. I like the idea of having a more limited source of healing that I have to be careful about how much I'm expending at any given time. You'll also sometimes find extra side areas and things while exploring that take these cure points to access. Every character has their own specialty of what they can use these points for, from healing characters on the side of the road for extra consumables and other little gifts and stuff, to bringing down big ice or flame barriers to get to areas you previously couldn't before that often contain treasure chests and things like that. There are various extra bits of exploration that you can find that if you're doing well for yourself and you're conserving your cure points, you can use them to explore deeper into other areas and get extra loot and stuff like that if you're not constantly having to heal yourself. This also means that consumables have a much more important part in the game. In a lot of JRPGs, your basic potions and stuff are only useful for the first couple hours of the game, because eventually healing magic just becomes a lot more convenient and efficient to use. But in this case, since consumables don't need cure points to have their effect, they're useful all the time, especially things like life bottles, the revival medicine, because one revive spell is very, very expensive. When you first get access to this system, you'll only have about 120 cure points to go around, and one revive spell costs 48, so you can only do 2 revives and then you're out of revives for a while. So having a secondary source of these revives, especially during hard boss fights where you might not want to use up that many, that's like 4 heals worth of points all in one thing, is really nice. So that means that consumables have a more important place in the game's healing economy, I guess you could call it. Also, to that end, you can only hold 15 of each consumable, which is an oddly low limit. A lot of JRPGs let you hold 99 of everything, so again, I think that's to make the healing feel like more of a limited resource that you have to be careful and maintain throughout your journeys, which I think is a really cool idea. Another really nice thing they've done that I really, really like is they've given each character their own sort of special mechanic that they call a perk that is something else exclusive to them that they can do in combat that is just besides their arts. For instance, the female main character, Shion, has bombs that she can throw out and then detonate by shooting them, and these bombs can take on various elements of whatever she shoots them with, giving you a source of sort of flexible elemental AoE damage that she can use, and the area is quite large too, so they're very useful. And the male main character, Alfin, has the flaming sword, which allows you to hold the art button down after using one of his normal arts, and if you've unlocked the flaming sword art that chains off of that one, then you will take out the flaming sword and use that to extend your combo. The only thing is the flaming sword burns whatever it touches, including you, which means it actually takes health to use the flaming sword attacks, but they're generally worth it because they're extremely powerful. So yeah, this is another thing that gives me like Spectacle Fighter vibes, as each character has some sort of special function that they can do that makes them more unique to play in battle. They've also changed the title system. In previous Tales games, titles were things that you earned for each character by story progression or accomplishing specific tasks, and they were a way to sort of track what that character has done so far. Now, titles are earned in a similar way, but they are sort of like little micro skill trees. Every title is on this big skill board, and each one has 5 different little nodes surrounding it, and you can get SP from battles as well as in larger lumps from side quests, making side quests very useful for building up your characters, and you can spend this SP to unlock these nodes around each title. So every time they earn a title, they also get a whole host of new things that they can learn, from small passives like increasing their damage to aerial enemies, to much larger passives like giving them more AG so that they can chain together more arts, to actually entirely new arts that they can only learn by purchasing them on this tree. And once you purchase all 5 of the nodes surrounding a title, you get some sort of completion bonus that's unique to each one. The Skit System has returned, one of my favorite features from Tales games just because they're usually fun. They are all fully voiced this time around, of course, and they have changed the way that they look. Instead of being like character portraits, now they're more like a sort of manga art panel kind of thing. I think they look pretty cool, actually. I like the change because it makes them a little bit more dynamic and interesting looking, and there are tons of skits to watch. The only thing I don't like about the Skit System is that the notification that you have one to watch is really small on the bottom right of the screen, and it's really easy to miss when you're focused on something else. So sometimes I'm pretty sure I've missed a couple of skits here and there just because I didn't actually see the notification in time, because it's kind of hard to see sometimes when you're focused on exploring and stuff. Story-wise, I obviously don't want to spoil anything, which is why I haven't shown any major story cutscenes or major story boss events or anything in the background, but it's basically about enslavement and subjugation. It's about a planet of people that see themselves as, basically perfect beings, and a planet of pretty normal humans that are being subjugated by them for the last 300 years, basically draining their life essence as energy for their own benefit. With the planet you're on being a bit more high fantasy, and the Renan area, the sort of gods in the sky as it were, being a lot more sci-fi with straight up laser barriers and stuff, it makes for a really interesting setting actually, and I think the story is actually very good. The characters that you'll meet and have along with you all have pretty interesting reasons for being there, and none of them feel two-dimensional. They all get quite a lot of screen time and development as you go, both in skits and in major story scenes, of course, and the story unfolds in a really nice, not too tropey way that actually makes it kind of a standout, in my opinion, among JRPG stories as being pretty grounded and interesting, and not too nonsensical and weird. Not that I mind nonsensical and weird, that just sort of comes with the territory of the genre, but it is nice to have a story that's a lot more grounded and has a lot of characters with some really nice motivations that are actually believable and followable and interesting to track as they develop and as they interact with the other characters in your party and sort of come to know themselves better as well as they come to know each other. It's just a really nice story, honestly. So far, I've really liked it. There have been some interesting twists. I like the fact that each of the major sort of kingdoms, the major areas that you visit, are entirely different, both visually and in terms of the type of oppression that's actually happening there and what you're really there to solve. It makes it feel less like you're checking off a list and more like you're actually exploring an interesting, alive world with its own motivations and reasons for being the way that it is. So far, I've really genuinely enjoyed the story, and the interactions between the characters goes from really heartfelt and nicely voice acted to very funny to just very serious and kind of uplifting in a way. And of course, you'll probably recognize a lot of the voice actors in this, especially if you watch anime or anything. You've probably heard like Erica Lindbeck and Bryce Papenbrook, and of course the main character Alfin is none other than Noctis himself, Ray Chase. So there are a lot of really, really good voice actors here, even on the English side, and of course if you want, you can switch to Japanese as well, so the option is there for people that like either one, which is really nice. Overall, I think this is one of the best JRPGs I've played in a very long time. I think this is an excellent return to form for a series while also feeling very fresh and new. I think this is the kind of JRPG that pretty much does everything right. There's not really been any part of this game so far that I felt was out of place or too tropey or made me roll my eyes a little bit. It's all been really nice, and it pretty much does everything that it's supposed to like a high degree of success, honestly. And I think this is a very good game that will hopefully go down in the series history as being one of the best modern entries. If you are at all a fan of JRPGs or of the Tales games specifically, or even of just normal RPGs and maybe you've never dipped your toes into the JRPG thing because you've always seen it as sort of impenetrable and maybe very time consuming, this is a very good one to start with if you're in that place because of its sort of streamlining of things that previously took a lot of time without removing any complexity from the combat to do it, which is nice. This is an excellent game to take a look at, so do feel free to check the description below for the Steam store page if you want to actually take a look at it. I 100% recommend it. So far, this actually might be my game of the year at this point. And thank you guys very much for watching. I'll see you next time.